Okay, so the Suns are out. Game 6 was super ugly for them. The Nuggets are awesome. And yes, not having Ayton in the last game, not having CP for some of the games, like, I know that has to matter. I feel like the Nuggets were going to win the series anyway. Maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know. Anyway, what happens in this offseason and moving forward for the Suns? Well, look, you got Kevin Durant, you got Devin Booker, you're out a whole bunch of draft picks. And I would say right now there's questions about Monty Williams, Deandre Ayton, and Chris Paul moving forward, as well as just the depth of this team overall, right? And for what it's worth, we've already got rumors saying the Bucks are eyeing Monty Williams, so take that for what you will. And we've already got little things here and there, not from like Shams or Woj specifically, but if you want to find it on Twitter, from like Tim McMahon and stuff, saying that they expect CP to be on a different team next season. And I don't want to beat you over the head with CBA contract stuff, but basically Chris Paul's got a partial guarantee of about $15 million next season, and so trading that, I've tried Googling it enough between whether the receiving team would take on CP's full $30 million guarantee or the partial guarantee. I don't know the specifics of it, but basically it's a little weird. We'll just leave it at that. And the last year of his contract is non-guaranteed completely. What do we think of CP at this point? He's probably got to play in like the mid to high 20s per game. He can't run every single pick and roll for you. He can't take a million mid-range jumpers and shoot 55% on them or whatever. He's not the defender he once was, but he can still be a leader. He could still have a super positive assist-to-turnover ratio. If he gets a little more comfortable with catch and shoots, I think he can be like a supercharged version of old Jason Kidd on the Mavs. There's still a place on a team for Chris Paul. I understand his health stuff. They don't have just a bunch of picks that they can throw into a Chris Paul trade. Now, Kevin O'Connor on Twitter said they've got some swaps, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. Stepien rule gets weird sometimes because I've seen other places on the internet saying they don't have the power to do that. But look, pretty much, man, I think there's two scenarios for a Chris Paul trade. The first one is like the not as exciting one, which is they trade him for like some team's assortment of role players who add up to whatever the money's got to be to trade for him, and it kind of rounds out your rotation, and that's sort of it. Or he's traded for another team's blah contract where the player's not bad but not great. The other scenario is if you want to look at the rumors, Fred VanVleet has been rumored for Phoenix, and I hope I don't get any of this wrong, but the CBA gets confusing sometimes. That opens up a huge can of worms between what Fred wants to do, and that's the biggest thing, but also what a potential move there would look like, because a sign and trade would hard cap the Suns. I imagine they would not want to do that. And so then whether it would technically be like a Fred opts into player option, then traded to Phoenix, bird rights go with him, then he agrees to an extension, or it's agree to extension and then get traded, whatever it would technically be. Unless that's not possible, in which case I'm dumb. And then as far as what happens to Chris Paul, if he ends up on the Raptors somewhere else, if other assets are going to the Raptors, like that becomes the whole big thing. Because from the Raptors' perspective, I mean, I know it puts him in a weird spot, because if Fred really wants to go to Phoenix, like it might just end up happening, but also from the Raptors' sense, it's like, well, can we get something besides like 38-year-old Chris Paul if we're going to be moving Fred? But still, at the same time, typically when it comes to sign-in trades or opt-in trades, whatever you want to call it, like they're usually not equal value trades, right? It's more so one guy wants to go somewhere, and how do you make that happen? Now, they've also been rumored for Terry Rozier, and that one would be a little more simple, most likely a 3-team deal. And I think those two names specifically are interesting for them because I think Fred and Rozier are similar in that they can make shots and they can make things happen off of a screen, but you don't want them running your entire offense. But of course, when you have KD and Booker, you don't need your guard to run your entire offense. So now let's get to Deandre Ayton, which I think is a little more interesting because obviously his age and that stuff. And I mean, look, we all get the Ayton conversation, right, between his relationship with the front office and Monty Williams, whatever it is. I'm not saying there's definitely something there, but it feels like there's something there. And then the constant thing of, well, were they finding him enough around the basket and on rolls? Was he being aggressive enough? I mean, we all see the talent with the dude, no question. It's just a matter of, can he turn a few of those jump hooks and turnaround jumpers and mid-rangers he loves into more just aggressive things at the basket, get himself more trips to the free throw line, and just be more mean, basically. The guy's peak was the playoffs when they went on the finals run, and he played great for most of that, And that's the thing. Like, if you think that you can still get that dude, then that to me is better than what you could get for him, unless I'm just underestimating what another team would offer for the guy. And, all that ties into relationship with the coach. Do you need a new coach? Just Ayton's personality in general. And do you need to remove any doubts Ayton might have in his mind about if the front office wants him and all that? Anyway, on to the trade stuff. Just to give you a few teams who I could picture making changes at center, which does not guarantee that they would want DeAndre Ayton, of course. Dallas and the Bulls. And even then, Vooch isn't bad. It's just kind of the whole blah thing with the Bulls right now. As well as like the Spurs, but they're currently hoping to get Wembanyama in 4 days from the lottery. And perhaps you could throw the Blazers in there as well. Like, I could picture them moving Nurkic, even if I think Nurkic got a little too bad of a rep from the consensus basketball world this season. He wasn't great, but I don't think he was horrible either. For the sake of throwing in more teams, I could picture the Warriors wanting to add a center. And I've already seen the Jordan Poole for Deandre Ayton meme on Twitter. I don't think that one's going to happen, but it's funny to read on Twitter nonetheless. Another team that's interesting when you think about centers is Charlotte. Mark Williams looked very good defensively once he started getting actual minutes. So I feel like they just want to ride it out with him, but maybe in their minds it's like, well, LaMelo's entering year 4. I could picture them getting a little impatient, but they're also in the running for Wemby, so we keep them on hold for now. So for what that's all worth. But the other thing with Ayton too is just like, I feel like there could be a disconnect between what the Suns want for Ayton and what other teams would be willing to give him, because in the Suns' eyes, it's like, bro, we're trading a 24-year-old first overall pick, and the other team's eyes, it's, well, he makes a lot of money and we question his aggressiveness and stuff. I'll just say this. I think Dallas is the most desperate team in the league to get a good center. And look, I'm sure that there's a bunch of Mavericks fans who saw the clip of Jokic grabbing a bunch of offensive rebounds with Ayton standing under the basket, basically just looking at him saying, I don't want that guy on my team no matter what. I still believe Dallas is probably the most desperate front office looking to add a 5, right? Finding a trade between those two teams is just kind of weird. Like, yeah, Dallas has picks to move, but if the Suns want actual players, it's like, well, Dallas is thin themselves after the Kyrie trade, so that one's kind of tough for what that's worth. And again, I don't know if Dallas is going to want Deandre Ayton, but I think Dallas is definitely going to want a center, So that was a long-winded thing. Besides that, yeah, the Suns need rotation players. Their salary's pretty high, so we'll see if they can just stay below the doomsday thing of, $14 million over the luxury tax or whatever, which basically hamstrings you from doing a bunch of stuff. So that's about it. KD's in his mid-30s, so they got to figure this stuff out pretty fast.